You already know what you should do. Somewhere under all the analyses, under the 17 mental tabs you have open right now, under the scenarios you've run and the ones you're about to run, you already know. You've probably known for a while. But knowing isn't the problem. The problem is that your mind won't let you act on it without first doing one more pass. Examining it from one more angle. Considering the version of events where you're wrong, where it goes badly, where the thing you didn't account for turns out to be the thing that mattered most. And so you think and think and think until the thinking becomes its own environment, its own weather system. And you've lost track of whether you're solving a problem or just living inside one. Here's the part nobody talks about. This tends to happen to people who are, by most measures, quite intelligent. Not despite their intelligence, because of it. That's worth sitting with. Because if you spent years treating your overthinking as a defect, as evidence of anxiety, indecision, or some fundamental inability to just be what I'm about to offer you, isn't reassurance. It's a more accurate map of what's actually happening. And a more accurate map is always more useful than a flattering one. Intelligence, in the psychological sense, is largely a capacity for simulation. The smarter you are in certain ways, the more fluently your mind can generate possible futures, model other people's perspectives, detect inconsistencies in your own reasoning, and hold multiple competing interpretations of a situation simultaneously. These are extraordinary capabilities. They add also under the wrong conditions, the precise machinery of suffering. Because a mind that can generate many possible futures cannot easily stop generating them. A mind attuned to nuance cannot easily settle for a simple answer when it can see clearly that the simple answer is incomplete. A mind practiced at noticing what's wrong in arguments, in plans, in other people's logic, eventually turns that same scrutiny inward. And it finds, as there's always going to find, plenty of material to work with. Overthinking is not a thinking problem. It's a threshold problem. The mind doesn't know when enough analysis is enough. And for certain kinds of minds, that threshold is set so high that it may as well not exist. There's a network in the brain called the default mode network, the DMN. It activates when you're not focused on an external task, when you're resting, daydreaming, waiting. For most of neuroscience history, it was considered unimportant, just background noise. Then researchers realized it was one of the most metabolically active regions in the entire brain. What is it doing during all that apparent rest? It's running simulations, reviewing the past, modeling the future, generating narratives about the self, who you are, how you're perceived, what things mean. The DMN is, in a sense, the brain's storytelling department. And in people with higher verbal intelligence and a strong tendency towards self-reflection, this network is more active, more elaborately connected, and harder to quiet. Now layer on top of that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, evaluation, and the inhibition of impulse. In overthinkers, this region tends to exert significant influence. It's the editor that never lets the first draft stand. It catches errors, flags, uncertainties, insists on revision, which is enormously useful when you're actually editing something. It's considerably less useful at midnight when you're trying to decide if a text you sent 3 days ago was interpreted incorrectly. The loop that forms between an overactive DMN and a hypervigilant prefrontal cortex is what researchers call rumination, not productive reflection, but repetitive self-referential thought that circles without resolution. The content changes. The structure doesn't. It's the same thought wearing different clothes, showing up at the same door every few minutes. And here's the cruel neurological detail. Rumination activates the brain's threat detection system, which releases cortisol, which narrows attention and makes creative, flexible thinking harder, which makes it more difficult to think your way out of the loop, which prolongs the loop. The very tool you're using to escape the problem is being degraded by the problem. It's like trying to fix your glasses while you're not wearing your glasses. Imagine a search engine that never stops running queries. It doesn't wait for you to type something in. It's constantly searching, indexing, cross-referencing, flagging potential errors in previous searches. Most of the time, this would be miraculous. In the right context, research, strategy, creative synthesis, it is miraculous. But when the search engine is pointed at your own life, at your relationships and choices, and the way someone looked at you during a meeting on Thursday, it has too much material and no off switch. Every answer surfaces 3 new searches. Every resolution opens a new thread. The browser never closes. Or think of it this way. Some minds are built like high-resolution cameras. They capture more detail, more texture, more of what others walk past without registering. This is genuinely valuable, until the camera is pointed at a situation that doesn't benefit from more resolution. A disagreement that would dissolve in low definition stays vivid and detailed and present. You can see every pixel of the thing that's hurting you, and that clarity, which is usually your gift, becomes the mechanism of your prolonged discomfort. There's something psychologists call metacognition, thinking about your thinking. And it turns out that the capacity for metacognition, while considered a marker of cognitive maturity and emotional intelligence, carries a cost that rarely gets discussed. When you can observe your own thought processes with precision, you also begin to notice their errors, their biases, the moments when your reasoning is motivated by fear rather than logic, or when your certainty is performing a function other than accuracy. And a mind sharp enough to notice all of this is also a mind that has difficulty trusting itself because it has seen too many times how its own conclusions can be wrong. This is what researchers call the intelligence trap, the phenomenon where higher cognitive ability increases your capacity to generate sophisticated justifications, to detect flaws in your own thinking, and to imagine catastrophic outcomes with vivid specificity. The result is that certainty becomes harder to reach, not easier, and decision-making becomes slower, not faster. Add to this a high capacity for cognitive empathy, the ability to model what other people are thinking and feeling, and you have a mind that is simultaneously analyzing the situation, analyzing itself, analyzing the situation, and modeling how 3 other people are probably analyzing the situation. The processing load is immense. The noise is extraordinary. And somewhere underneath all of it is a person who would really just like to know what to do. There are 3 domains worth working in here, and I want to be direct that none of them are about thinking less. They're about thinking differently and knowing when to stop. The first domain is somatic interruption. The rumination loop is a cognitive neurological event, but it has a physical address. It lives in a body that is sitting still, breathing shallowly, often in a closed or slightly hunched posture. Changing the body's state is one of the fastest ways to interrupt a loop that intellectual effort cannot break from the inside. This doesn't mean exercise is a general lifestyle recommendation. It means specifically when you notice the loop activating. Change your physical state before attempting to resolve the thought. Walk, breathe deliberately into your lower abdomen, change rooms, put your hands in cold water. The goal is not to feel better. The goal is to shift the neurological substrate so that re-engagement with the thought happens from a different physiological baseline. The second domain is decision hygiene. Overthinkers often don't have a consistent framework for when a decision is done. They keep reopening closed files. A useful corrective is what decision scientists call satisficity, identifying in advance the minimum threshold of information that would make a decision good enough rather than optimal. Optimization is the enemy of completion. A decision made at 80% confidence and acted upon is almost always more valuable than a decision made at 95%. Confidence and endlessly deferred. Create explicit stopping points. Write down the criteria. When those criteria are met, the decision is made, not perfect. Made. The file closes. The second piece of decision hygiene is time boxing, allocating a defined period to think about something, and treating the end of that period as structural permission to stop. This isn't suppressing thought. It's giving the prefrontal cortex a constraint it can actually work with. Unconstrained time tends to produce unconstrained thinking. Bounded time tends to produce conclusions. The third domain is narrative reorientation. Most rumination is not actually about the event. It appears to be it's about what the event means, usually about the self. The missed opportunity doesn't just represent a missed opportunity. It represents something about who you are and whether you can be trusted to navigate your own life. When you locate the narrative layer, the meaning being constructed, not just the event being reviewed, you can begin to question the narrative directly, which is a more productive target than the event itself. A practical version of this is the so what ladder. You take the thought that's looping and ask, sincerely, and if that were true, what would that mean? You follow the chain down, not to catastrophize, but to locate the actual belief at the bottom. Once you can see the belief clearly, you can examine it on its own terms rather than through the proxy of the event you've been circling for 3 days. There's a version of this video that ends by telling you your overthinking is actually a superpower, I'm not going to do that. It is not a superpower. It is a capacity that has a cost. And the cost is real. And pretending otherwise helps no one. But it is also not a disorder. It is not proof of weakness or damage or a mind that is too broken to be trusted. It is what happens when genuine cognitive sophistication, the ability to see multiple things at once, to hold complexity, to resist the comfort of easy answers, runs without adequate boundaries, without a clear threshold for enough, without permission to close the file. The sharpness of your mind is not the problem. The problem is that no one taught it when to rest. You are not someone who thinks too much. You are someone who was never shown how to stop. And those are very different things. One is a trait, the other is a skill gap. And skill gaps, unlike traits, can be addressed. The goal is not a quieter mind in the sense of an emptier one. It's a mind that has learned to trust its own conclusions enough to act on them. A mind that can open a question fully, sit with genuine uncertainty, and then when the time comes, put the question down. Not because the answer is perfect, but because the cost of continuing to hold it has become higher than the cost of moving without certainty. You don't need to resolve everything before you can move. You never did. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more. Share your thoughts and comments. I'm always curious to know what you guys think.